Good evening, here I am again. Hey, I want to share something tonight with you, another little tidbit of information, or just some thoughts, basically, that I got inspired by, inspired by the comments that you guys made. That made me do a lot of thinking. So I really appreciate the last batch of comments on the last video last night about the dew point. There are a lot of good ideas to spin off from, and I think I could generate some more videos based on some of the things people actually said. One of the things that came up was this, and I want to share something with you. So hang on, let me switch screens here. Okay, I've mentioned this before on previous videos, this book. This is called the Sasquatch Seekers Field Manual. As you see, it's written by David George Gordon and illustrated by yours truly, me. This was a project I worked on a few years back for Mountaineers Books and for David George Gordon. And it was a fun project. And you're probably asking, Rick, why are you talking about Sasquatches on your channel again? What is it with you and the Sasquatch? Anyway, well, first of all, let me explain a couple things. All right, this book was written by David George Gordon. I'd be great if you guys would look him up and check out his works. He's a great guy, and the Mountaineers organization is an excellent organization here in the Pacific Northwest. Now, I'm not plugging the book for myself. I already got paid for the book. I'm plugging it on behalf of David and the Mountaineers organization because they're both good entities. David is an entity as well as an interesting guy. If you look him up, he's well known for a couple of things. First of all, he's known as the bug chef. He's kind of does some unconventional things. He talks about how to make meals from insects.
I would say this is the single largest insect feast in the history of the world, and I'm not just bragging.
Bacon red crickets, I recommend. And I'm looking for tarantulas, but I can't seem to find it.
Lovingly prepared and permanently presented to you all. Bon appetit.
Check him out. He's kind of got a presence out there. He's been on some, big time talk shows and stuff. So anyway, he's an interesting character. He's also a very good blues harmonica player. So interesting guy. Anyway, so why did I bring this up? Well, this book is not really about Sasquatches. He's using the subject to make a point about something else. And I think that's the kind of point I'm interested in with regard to the van-dwelling community. And that is, let me read the title again, the Sasquatch Seekers Field Manual, Using Citizen Science to Uncover North America's Most Elusive Creature. And the key word here, the key phrase, is citizen science. So I guess one of the things I'm trying to be is a better citizen science. After illustrating David's book and thinking about that for a while, I think a contribution that we could make as we live in this alternative lifestyle in vans is that we could pay attention to what we're doing. And a lot of people are doing this. I'm not saying nobody's doing it. Obviously, this is a challenge to myself, not necessarily just to everybody else. But you hear a lot of things being said, and people tend to do what the crowd says. There's a lot of logical fallacies, a lot of fallacies in reasoning. So if we're going to be critical thinkers, we have to be aware of the fallacies in reasoning. Like, one fallacy that I see a lot is something called the democratic fallacy. And I'm not talking about Democrats. I think I've mentioned this before. I'm talking about the fallacy which says that if the majority says something is true, therefore it's true. Well, that's not necessarily so. The majority can be wrong. the minority can be right. In fact, often it's the minority or a few people, like the small van community. You know, we're actually a minority. We're not the big picture here. But yeah, we might be discovering things by the way we live that could be valuable to everybody. So just because the majority says something is true doesn't mean it's true. Sometimes the minority is right and the majority is wrong. That's a logical fallacy. So we owe it to ourselves to think through things critically. Like when somebody says, a wood fire is drier than a propane fire. What do we really know about that exactly? Well, we should do our homework and find out for sure if that's true or to what degree it's true. Another fallacy in reasoning that I hear a lot, that we all kind of tend to yield to a lot, is the fallacy known as the appeal to authority. You know, because somebody has a great deal of authority, or they present themselves in an authoritative way, that means they're right. No, it doesn't. A lot of times the experts are wrong about stuff, and it's people who don't even have any background in something that figure things out that make great contributions. I mean, there's been, down through history, there's been lots of things like that. Take one that comes to mind is Gregor Mendel. I don't know if you know that name. He was a monk, lived in a monastery, and just studied pea plants. And from his data, we now have the entire science of genetics. Here's another story that is interesting to me. I used to live in Edmonds, which is just a little south of here. I'm in Everett right now. And there used to be a guy, I used to go to the beach there and sit and watch the sun go down, just like I've been doing for years. I'm doing that right now. The sun is already down. I'm making my video as I look out over the bay. But there used to be a guy that would, as I was sitting there on the beach, he would come down in his swimming suit. I mean, this would be any time of the year, in the middle of winter. I'd be sitting out there, and the guy would be in a swimming suit, and he'd walk out into the water with some sort of device in his hand, some sort of little thermometer or something, and he'd stick it in and take a sample of the water and then walk back. He became kind of known as some sort of town character. Everybody talked about him, and you know how people are. They just like to get together and gossip and talk about the character without even knowing who the guy is or what he's really up to. So one day I couldn't stand it anymore, and I just asked the guy, "Hey, what are you doing? I've seen you over and over again." And it turned into quite an interesting conversation. The guy told me that he had just had a personal interest in what was going on in the environment around this particular region, and what was going on with the ebb and flow of the tide and the temperature and the movement of the water, and a lot of things, the little currents, little eddy currents in and around. And he somehow was taking data points and collecting this big matrix of data. And apparently some of the big scientific organizations knew about him, and they've been using his data. You know, a guy like that, that's just a regular guy that's just taken an interest in something, has been making a major contribution to the knowledge of the environment around here. And I was just blown away. And he did a lot of other things. He had plants, different kinds of plants he was studying. I didn't go into too much detail of what kind of plants, but anyway, he was just an interesting character. And you can look him up on Facebook. There's actually, I think there's still a Facebook. I'll verify this before I put up my video, but there's a Facebook page called the Edmonds Water Temperature Taker Guy. And you just look that up, and there's a picture of him there. And anyway, it's kind of bizarre. Anyway, I'm just thinking that we have that opportunity here. If we just study what we're doing, we might be, breaking some kind of ground by keeping data on what we're doing, because we're a small population of people living in vehicles. That's kind of, there's always been a few of us around in every society, but